I died at 2:47 a.m. My name is Marcus Chen, a 34-year-old 911 dispatcher who spent 12 years coordinating emergency responders through crisis after crisis. And what I experienced during those 8 minutes of clinical death revealed a truth about prayer that Jesus himself called forbidden. You need to understand something about my life before that night. I wasn't just someone who worked in emergency services. I was the voice on the other end of the line when your world fell apart. When you dialed 911 because your dad collapsed over dinner, when your kid stopped breathing at 3 a.m., when the car wreck left you trapped and bleeding, I was the calm in your storm. I talked hundreds of people through their worst moments. I learned to compartmentalize fear. I learned to sound confident when I had no idea if help would make it in time. I learned to pray. I prayed constantly at work, between calls, during breaks, even while coordinating units. Quick, desperate prayers. God, let this kid make it. Please don't let them die before we get there. Jesus, guide our people to find them in time. I thought I was doing God's work. I thought my prayers mattered. I was wrong about everything. My faith wasn't casual. I grew up in a Chinese-American household where Christianity came later but took root deep. My mom converted when I was 7, right after my grandmother's cancer went into remission, following what the doctors called an impossible recovery. From that moment on, prayer became the language of our home. We prayed before meals. We prayed before school. We prayed when things went wrong and when things went right. Prayer was our direct line to heaven, our weapon against chaos, our insurance policy against tragedy. So when I got the dispatch job, I saw it as a calling. I could combine my faith with my work. I could pray over situations in real time. I could be God's instrument in the most critical moments. Every shift became a spiritual battlefield. Every successful rescue felt like answered prayer. Every death felt like I hadn't prayed hard enough. The night I died started like any other. Monday night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., cold coffee in a chipped mug. 3 computer monitors glowing in the dim light. The constant hum of radio chatter. I'd taken 47 calls by 2:30 a.m. structure fire, domestic disturbance, diabetic emergency, motorcycle accident, overdose, chest pain, assault, the rhythm of human crisis steady as a heartbeat. Then my own heart stopped. No warning, no chest pain, no trouble breathing. One moment I was updating the status board, the next I was on the floor. Later they told me it was a sudden cardiac arrhythmia, an electrical misfire. My heart just decided to stop beating. I was 34 with no medical history, no risk factors, no reason. But there I was, face down on the dispatch room floor, while my co-workers screamed into their radios for help. I need you to understand what dying feels like. It's not like the movies. No slow fade to black. No peaceful acceptance. There's a moment of absolute primal terror when your consciousness realizes the body's shutting down. I felt my heart stop. I felt the silence in my chest where the rhythm should have been. I felt my vision collapse inward, like looking through a tunnel getting smaller and smaller. And then I felt my awareness separate from my body entirely. Imagine being pulled backward through your own skull. That's what it felt like. Like something reached into the core of who I was and yanked me out the back of my head. I was suddenly 10 feet above my body, watching 2 co-workers start CPR. I could see the coffee spilled across the floor. I could see the frozen image on my screen from the call I'd been handling. I could see my own face, slack and gray, and I thought, that's me. I'm dead. I'm actually dead. And I wasn't ready. I'd prayed for other people every single day for 12 years. I'd asked God to intervene in thousands of emergencies. But hovering above my own corpse in that moment, I realized I had no idea how to pray for myself. The words I'd repeated so easily for strangers felt hollow and distant. What was I supposed to say? What prayer works when you're already dead? Then the light came. It wasn't gradual. It was instant. One moment I was in the dispatch room. The next I was somewhere else entirely. The light was so intense it should have hurt, but it didn't. It was warm. It was alive. It was conscious. I know how that sounds. Light isn't supposed to be conscious. But this light was aware of me. It knew me. It saw everything I'd ever been and everything I'd ever done, and it loved me anyway. That love was overwhelming. It was like being held by the sun itself. And then he stepped out of the light. Jesus, I know what you're thinking. How did I know it was Jesus? How could I be certain? I can't explain it rationally. I just knew. The same way you know your own name. The same way you recognize your mother's voice. I knew him with a certainty beyond knowledge. It was recognition at a cellular level. My spirit knew his spirit. I fell to my knees, or what would have been my knees if I'd had a body. I felt shame. I felt awe. I felt terror. I felt love so fierce it made me want to weep. He smiled at me. That's what I remember most, his smile. Not the sad, suffering Jesus from the crucifixes I grew up seeing. Not the stern, judgmental figure I sometimes imagined when I felt guilty. It was joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy at seeing me, like I was someone he'd been waiting to meet. Like I mattered. Marcus, he said. His voice was everything thunder and whisper at the same time. There's something you need to see, something you need to understand before you go back. Go back. The words barely registered. All I could focus on was the fact that Jesus Christ knew my name, that he was standing right there, that this was real, this was actually happening. I don't understand, I managed to say. I tried to pray. I tried to live right. I tried to help people. I know, he said, and there's so much I want to show you. But first, I need to tell you about the prayer. The prayer. Something in the way he said it made my spirit go cold. There was weight in those words, warning, urgency. What prayer? I asked. He turned and gestured, and suddenly we were somewhere else. I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't a place with walls or ground or sky. It was more like we were standing in the middle of a vast awareness. Around us, I could see threads of light, millions of them connecting earth to heaven. Each thread pulsed with color and energy. These are prayers, Jesus told me. Every sincere prayer ever spoken creates a connection. Can you see them? I could. The sight was overwhelming. Millions of golden threads stretching from earth upward, each one unique, each one carrying the hopes and fears and desperate pleas of humanity. Some threads were bright and steady, others flickered weakly. Some were tangled together in great knots, and some I noticed were dark, poisonous-looking, wrong. What are those? I pointed at the dark threads. Those, Jesus said, and his voice carried a sadness that made my heart break, are the prayers that do more harm than good. The prayers that Christians pray every single day without realizing what they're asking for. The prayers I can't answer because they contradict my Father's very nature. I stared at him confused. But we're supposed to pray. You taught us to pray. How can prayer be harmful? Not prayer itself, he said gently. But there is one prayer, Marcus. One prayer that more Christians pray than any other. And it is forbidden. Forbidden. The word hung in the air between us like a physical thing. I thought about all the prayers I'd prayed. All the desperate pleas I'd sent up during emergency calls. All the rote recitations I'd mumbled before meals. Which one was forbidden? What had I been doing wrong? I need you to see where this prayer comes from, Jesus continued. I need you to understand why it's so dangerous. Because you've prayed it too, Marcus. You've prayed it hundreds of times, and it's been blocking what I actually want to give you. My mind raced. The Lord's Prayer? No, he taught us that one himself. Prayers for healing, for protection, for guidance. What could possibly be forbidden about any of those? Jesus looked at me with such compassion that I felt tears I didn't have running down a face I no longer possessed. The prayer I'm talking about is one you've probably prayed in the last 24 hours. It sounds humble. It sounds righteous. It sounds like exactly the kind of thing a good Christian should say. But it's built on a lie about who my Father is and what he wants for you. Around us, the dark threads seem to pulse and writhe. I could feel them now, could sense the wrongness emanating from them. How many of those threads were mine? How many times had I sent up prayers that Jesus himself called forbidden? Before I tell you which prayer it is, he said, I need to show you something. I need to show you what happens when Christians pray this prayer. I need you to see the damage it causes, both in heaven and on earth. Because once you know, Marcus, everything changes. Your entire understanding of prayer, of God's nature, of your relationship with the Father, it all shifts. He reached out and touched one of the dark threads. The moment his finger made contact, I was pulled into a vision so vivid, it felt more real than reality itself. I saw a woman kneeling beside her bed, hands clasped, eyes squeezed shut. I saw her mouth moving, forming words I couldn't quite hear, and I saw how her prayer rose up like smoke. But instead of reaching heaven, it curled back on itself, creating a barrier between her and the very blessing she was asking for. "This is what it looks like," Jesus whispered. "This is what happens when my children pray from fear instead of faith. When they use words that sound holy but carry a spirit of doubt and distance." I wanted to ask which words. I wanted to know exactly what prayer he meant. But before I could speak, he pulled me into another scene. A man in a hospital waiting room, head in his hands, praying desperately for his dying dad. But his prayer was creating the same dark thread, the same barrier, the same block between him and God's perfect will. "Why?" I demanded. Why would God create a prayer that blocks blessings? Why would we be taught to pray something that's forbidden? Jesus turned to me and his eyes held galaxies. "You weren't taught this prayer by my father, Marcus. You learned it from religion, from fear, from a fundamental misunderstanding of who God is and what he wants for his children. And I'm going to tell you exactly what it is." He paused. The entire spiritual realm seemed to pause with him. Even the threads of light around us went still, as if creation itself was holding its breath. "But first," he said, "you need to understand one more thing." He gestured again, and I saw myself. Not my current self, hovering in this spiritual dimension, but myself at work. Myself taking emergency calls. Myself praying those quick, desperate prayers over situations I had no control over. And I saw what happened to those prayers. I saw how they rose up bright and sincere, but twisted at the last moment by the ending I always added. The phrase I thought was humble. The words I believed showed my surrender to God's will. The forbidden prayer, I had prayed it constantly, and it had been blocking God's best for my life the entire time. "The prayer I'm talking about," Jesus said, and his voice filled the cosmos, "is one you've probably prayed yourself. Maybe even today. It's 3 words that seem righteous. 3 words that sound like surrender. 3 words that Christians are taught represent humility and acceptance of God's will." My heart, the one I no longer had, was pounding. Somehow I knew what he was about to say. I could feel the truth rising in my consciousness like dawn breaking over darkness. "I needed you to understand all of this," he continued, "because what I'm about to reveal will challenge everything you thought you knew about prayer. Everything you were taught about approaching God, everything you believed about faith and trust and surrender." He leaned closer, and the love radiating from him was so intense, I thought I might dissolve completely into pure light. "The forbidden prayer, Marcus, is the one you end by saying." And then, just as he was about to speak the words, I felt a violent pull. My spirit jerked backward. The light began to fade. Jesus' face started to blur. "Wait!" I screamed.
"Tell me, what's the prayer?"
"I need to know." His voice followed me as I fell away from heaven, back to my body, back to the dispatch room floor, where paramedics were shocking my heart for the 3rd time. "You'll remember," he promised. "And when you do, you'll need to tell them. You'll need to warn them, because this prayer is destroying the faith of millions, and they don't even know it." Then my chest exploded with pain as my heart started beating again, and I gasped back into life with the answer burning in my mind like fire. I know what the forbidden prayer is. I know why it's so dangerous. And I know what happens when you stop praying it and start praying the way Jesus actually taught us to approach the Father. What I learned in those 8 minutes changed everything. And what Jesus showed me next, what he revealed about the true nature of prayer and God's will for your life, it's something every single Christian needs to hear. Because the prayer he was talking about, the one he called forbidden, it's one you've probably prayed yourself, maybe even this morning. And until you understand why it's spiritually dangerous, you'll never access the full power of prayer the way God intended. I needed to understand why. What made this prayer forbidden? What was I missing about the nature of God, about the purpose of prayer, about the relationship we're supposed to have with our Father in heaven? The answers Jesus gave me would shatter every assumption I'd ever made about faith. But first I had to survive. I had to make sense of what I'd seen. I had to figure out how to tell people that the prayer they'd been taught was holy was actually creating a barrier between them and God's perfect will. What Jesus showed me next changed everything I thought I knew about heaven, hell, prayer, and the very nature of God himself. Jesus took me to a place I never wanted to see. The light around us shifted, no longer the brilliant warmth that had enveloped me moments before. Now it grew dim, cold, and in that dimness I saw them, millions of them, prayers, rising from earth like smoke. But they weren't reaching heaven. They were stopping, suspended in the air, trapped. My heart pounded. Fear gripped me. What was I seeing? Jesus spoke, his voice carrying a weight that made my spirit tremble. Do you see them? These are the prayers that never reach my Father. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I was seeing. Prayers that don't reach God? How is that possible? He continued. There is a prayer many of my children pray, a prayer they've been taught, a prayer they believe honors me, but it does not. Then he showed me closer. I saw faces, people I knew, people from my church, people I loved, all praying the same thing. And their prayers, rising with such hope, with such faith, hitting an invisible barrier and falling back to earth. What prayer? I whispered, my voice barely audible. What are they praying? Jesus looked at me with eyes full of sorrow. They are praying for their own will to be done. I didn't understand, not yet, but he was about to reveal everything. He took my hand, and suddenly we were standing in a church. A familiar church. I recognized it. The sanctuary where I'd spent years worshiping. And I saw myself, kneeling at the altar, praying, my lips moving with words I'd spoken 1,000 times before. God, I claim this blessing. I decree and declare prosperity over my life. I command this miracle to manifest. In Jesus' name, I take authority and demand this answer. I heard my own voice, and then I heard Jesus speak beside me. This is the forbidden prayer. The words hit me like thunder. I'd prayed this exact prayer for years. We all had. Every Sunday, every prayer meeting, decreeing, declaring, commanding, taking authority. Jesus continued, his voice gentle but firm. My children have been taught to command me, to demand from me, to claim what they believe is theirs by right. But they don't come to me as children come to a father. They come as masters issuing orders to a servant. Tears streamed down my face. I understood now. The revelation hit me like a wave. This prayer reverses the order of heaven, he said. It places human will above divine sovereignty. It makes you the God and me the servant. And prayers prayed from this position can't reach my Father because they don't come from a heart of trust. They come from a heart of control. I fell to my knees right there in that vision. The weight of it was crushing. How many times had I prayed this way? How many years had I spent commanding God instead of surrendering to Him? How many of my prayers never reached heaven because I'd approached the throne with demands instead of trust? He knelt beside me, his hand on my shoulder. Millions are praying this way right now, he said. Millions have been taught that faith means taking control, declaring their own outcomes, commanding spiritual forces. But true faith is surrender. True faith says, your will, not mine. I looked up at him through my tears. But we thought we were being strong. We thought we were exercising authority. You have authority, he said, but not over me, not over my Father's will. Your authority is over darkness, over fear, over the enemy of your soul. But you don't command the King of Kings. You trust him. Then he showed me something that shattered me completely. He showed me hell, not the fire, not the torment, but the separation. And in that separation, I saw people. People who had prayed these commanding prayers their entire lives. People who had spent years decreeing and declaring, convinced they were people of great faith. But they'd never truly surrendered. They'd never truly known him. They'd created a God in their own image. A God who obeyed their commands. A God who served their will. And when they died, they discovered the truth. The real God, the sovereign God, the God who won't be commanded. And they realized too late that they'd never truly known him at all. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, Jesus said, his voice breaking with grief. but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven." I sobbed, deep broken sobs, the kind that come from the very core of your being, because I realized how close I had come, how close I'd been to spending eternity separated from him, all while thinking I was one of his most faithful followers. But then he lifted my face, wiped my tears, and spoke words I'll never forget. "But you're here now, and now you know, and knowing changes everything." In that moment, something shifted in me. The old way of praying died. The demanding, the commanding, the claiming, it all fell away, and in its place rose something new, something pure, something that felt like coming home. I asked him, my voice trembling, "How should we pray?" He smiled. The warmth returned to his eyes. "Come to me as a child comes to a father, with trust, with surrender. Tell me your heart, share your desires, but always, always end with these words, 'Not my will, but yours be done.'" It was so simple, so beautiful, and yet so opposite everything I'd been taught. "When you pray this way," he continued, "your prayers rise like incense before my Father's throne. They reach heaven, they're heard, and they're answered according to his perfect will, which is always better than anything you could decree or declare on your own." I understood then. This wasn't about being passive. It wasn't about having no faith. It was about having the right kind of faith. The kind that trusts God's wisdom more than my own understanding. The kind that surrenders control because it knows his control is perfect. He showed me one more thing before I returned. He showed me my future prayers, and I saw them rising, clear, unobstructed, reaching the throne, being received, being answered, not always the way I expected, but always in the way that was best. "Who is affected by this?" I asked him. "Who needs to hear this?" He looked at me with such intensity. "Everyone who's been taught to command me. Everyone who decrees and declares their own will over mine. Everyone in churches across the world who's confused authority with control. They need to know before it's too late." The urgency in his voice shook me. This wasn't just about better prayer practices. This was about eternity, about knowing God truly, not just knowing about him, about surrender, not just spiritual techniques. Then he brought me back to my body, back to life, but I was not the same person who died on that operating table. Everything changed. My prayer life became my lifeline, not a tool to get what I wanted, but a connection to the heart of God. I stopped decreeing, started surrendering, stopped claiming, started trusting, and the peace that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced when I was trying to control my own future. Miracles still happened. In fact, more miracles happened, but they were God's miracles, not my manufactured declarations. Prayers were answered, but in God's timing, God's way, according to God's perfect knowledge of what I truly needed. I watched relationships heal that I'd been declaring healed for years. I saw provision come that I'd been commanding to manifest. But it came when I stopped demanding and started trusting, when I stopped trying to be God and let God be God. The most profound change was internal. The anxiety melted away, the striving ceased. The constant need to be in control, to make things happen, to force outcomes through spiritual warfare and declaration, it all dissolved. And in its place came rest, deep soul-level rest. If you're hearing this and recognizing yourself in this story, if you've been taught to decree and declare, to claim and command, to take authority over God himself, please hear me. You're not alone. Millions have been taught this way. But it's not too late to change. There's another way to pray, the way Jesus taught, the way that reaches heaven. Come to God as a father, not as a servant to command. Tell him your heart, your fears, your desires, your needs. Be honest, be real, but then in faith and true faith surrender. Say those words that Jesus himself prayed in his darkest hour, "Not my will, but yours be done." This is the prayer that breaks through. This is the prayer that reaches the throne. This is the prayer that changes everything. Stop trying to be the master, become the child. Stop commanding the king, start trusting the Father. This shift, this one simple shift in how you approach prayer will transform not just your prayer life, but your entire relationship with God, because God doesn't want your demands. He wants your heart. He doesn't want your declarations. He wants your trust. He doesn't want you exercising authority over him. He wants you resting in his authority over everything. And when you pray from that place of surrender, from that place of childlike trust, heaven opens. Your prayers rise like incense. They're heard, they're cherished, and they're answered by a Father who loves you more than you could ever decree or declare for yourself. This is what Jesus showed me. This is what he wants you to know. The forbidden prayer is any prayer that places your will above God's, and the prayer that reaches heaven is the one that surrenders your will to his. The choice is yours, but choose quickly, because every moment spent praying the forbidden prayer is a moment your prayers are falling short of heaven, a moment wasted in spiritual striving instead of resting in grace. I chose surrender, and my life has never been the same. The peace I have now, the joy, the answered prayers, the intimacy with God, it's beyond anything I experienced in all my years of decreeing and declaring. You can have this too, right now in this moment. Stop, surrender, pray differently, pray as a child, pray with trust, pray, your will be done. And watch as heaven opens and God meets you in ways you never experienced when you were trying to command him. This is the revelation Jesus gave me. This is the truth that changed everything. And this is the message he asked me to share with you. Will you receive it? Will you change how you pray? The answer to that question determines not just the effectiveness of your prayers, but the depth of your relationship with the God who loves you more than you could ever imagine. Choose surrender. Choose trust. Choose the prayer that reaches heaven and experience the life you were always meant to live, the life of a beloved child, not a commanding master, the life of peace, not striving, the life of answered prayer, not frustrated declaration. Jesus showed me the forbidden prayer, but more importantly, he showed me the right way, the only way, the way that leads to life. May you find that way. May you pray that prayer, and may your life be transformed as mine was by the simple but profound act of surrendering your will to his.